I am unable to stream today, so I will speak briefly here on updates. A lot of stuff has happened, obviously. So as of this recording, 3:37 p.m. PT, the 28th of February, Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, still stands, though it may not forever. You see, Russia's initial days of the invasion have been logistically troubled, but they do have one advantage over Ukraine. It's really the main advantage that they've had, and that is that they have a lot of equipment. A lot of equipment. There is currently a convoy of armored vehicles moving towards Kiev. At the time this article was released about a day ago, I believe it was about 3 miles long. Now, I think it may be twice that size, possibly larger. Now, from a logistics perspective, the idea of a single immobile armored column stretching along one road, like just particularly bad traffic on a highway, is very, very amusing. I mean, I'm no general. It just seems like the sort of thing that could be really easily destroyed with the right missile, drone, bombing run, whatever, inshallah. But, a lot of equipment is headed towards Kiev. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of tanks, probably thousands of armored personnel vehicles, rockets, everything. The hope, the dream would be that all of the logistical failings that have plagued Russia thus far, soldiers not having enough food, tanks not having enough gas, not having enough repair equipment, not having the necessary, mobility to get repair parts where they need to go in time for them to be meaningful, continues to afflict Russia, and this giant armored column just stalls out on the road they're on. That would be the hope, but that is a hope, not a guarantee. Because the amount of equipment on that road heading towards Kiev is more than I am comfortable claiming the Ukrainian Defense Force is capable of handling. Meanwhile, peace talks have actually begun, though with no resolution thus far. This is the first time Russia has expressed interest in peace talks without any kind of precondition of surrender. For the first few days, it was, let's talk about peace, which you can have by surrendering. But now it's a no precondition peace talk. Funny how quickly they moved from one to another. God. Of course, my belief is that these peace talks are really just a way of wasting time. Ukraine will not, at least I imagine they won't, agree to anything other than get out of Ukraine. That is what they want. I don't think there's much negotiating to be had here. Leave. That's the precondition. Russia engaging in these peace talks feels like a way to draw out time while they attempt to undermine the country in other ways. It also gives them a better pretext, If they engage in these peace talks, they get to look like they're trying to find an amicable solution. That's always the ability to engage in the thinnest veneer of plausible deniability has always been a part of Russia's diplomatic strategy, They can never just own up to things. Yes, we're invading. Yes, we want land. It's always, oh, actually, we're defending the poor people of the Donbass region from the genocide Ukraine is going to commit, even though we have no evidence they're going to commit it and have made no effort at providing any evidence. It's all plausible deniability. These peace talks make them look like they're willing to come to the table. We'll see if anything comes of it. Additionally, on the economic side of things, things are going miserably bad, like unimaginably bad for Russia. First of all, Ukraine is joining the EU, which means that they are now firmly going to be in the West's economic bloc. This will be to the benefit of Ukraine because the West is far, far wealthier than Russia, if you can believe it. If you can imagine such a thing, we are actually doing better off economically. Sanctions have been obliterating, and I mean just tearing apart poor old Russia. They have lines outside banks. Banks are running out of cash. People are piled up outside of ATMs, The ruble's current value is now firmly below a single Robux. It's actually below 1 cent. The markets froze over the weekend, but as you can see, after they opened on Sunday, it went from 1.2 US cents to 0.94 US cents, meaning that over the course of one weekend, a single weekend, its value relative to the US dollar dropped by 25%. That is unimaginable. And this is in the opening week of the invasion. I mean, it's insane how quickly the Russian economy is falling apart. You really cannot get away with this kind of mechanized invasion without the consent of the global banking industry these days, which, you know, well, that's kind of a good and a bad thing, isn't it, right? I mean, on the negative end, the global banking industry has signed off on quite a bit of really bad things that we've done, that a lot of people have done. But on the plus side, at least this one time, we're all coming together. We're agreeing what Russia's doing is bad. Anyway, Russia's in a really desperate situation right now. They may still be able to conquer Ukraine. Not impossible, but the powers of the EU are arming them to the teeth. Even Switzerland is contributing financial sanctions to Russia, and you know how little they like to get involved. The fighter jets are being sent to Ukraine. That's a huge deal because, sending Javelin missiles is one thing. They're expensive, sure, but, they're handheld equipment. A fighter jet is not handheld. You actually can't carry one on your back. You would die. They are very expensive. And the fact that these are being supplied directly, this is the fact that the powers that be, the West, are continuing to supply Ukraine in this fashion suggests to me that they are confident Ukraine is capable of holding off in some fashion. Maybe Kyiv falls, but Russia is not Kyiv. They are committing Ukraine is not just Kyiv. Russia is committing a massive amount of their resources to taking Kyiv specifically, but there are plenty of major cities all across Ukraine that still have significant Ukrainian defenses piled up. And as long as that, Polish-Ukrainian border remains somewhat clear, more armaments can continue to be funneled towards the Ukrainian armed forces. And I hope they do. Now, all of this leads me to the thing that I really, really, really did want to talk about, which is nuclear Armageddon. So there are a lot of people really worried about the end of the world, which I think people should be, while keeping in mind the fact that this is a fairly marginal possibility, not at all a guarantee. See, Russia has always been willing to flex nuclear brinksmanship. It's called, what do they call it? Madman theory? I think Nixon talked about this. It was basically the idea that by posturing as unstable, unreliable, dangerous, irrational, you achieve rational geopolitical goals because other countries will treat you with the possibility that you might do the worst thing. And if you're a nuclear-armed power, the worst thing you can do is apocalyptic. So it's possible Putin is engaging in that. They have been sort of threatening nuclear action against the West, Russia, I mean. They're also putting nuclear weapons in Belarus. Belarus has renounced its non-nuclear and neutral status, so on. There was a referendum held. I don't know if referendums mean anything. Belarus is not a democracy, not even close to one. Not even remotely close to one. So I don't know what a referendum means, but yeah, as if they would be allowed to say no. Come on. Anyway, in terms of the nuclear thing, okay? It's difficult to talk about this. I can only really talk about my thoughts. I'm no expert on the subject. Here is what I think. I think that Putin is a very intelligent person, and that you can be intelligent while also being a fucking lunatic. And I think that he might be a little bit of both of these things. It is possible that all of what Putin is doing right now is part of some broad geopolitical game that's just not going his way, that he's rational enough to know when the game is lost to set his pieces down, that he doesn't really care about the brinksmanship and about the Russian soldiers dying because A, he does not care about his people, we know that, and B, he knows that his brinkmanship won't lead the West to fire any first strikes, so he feels he can get away with it, but when all's said and done, he'll let things ride and, no real threat of nuclear Armageddon. The counter to that, the other possibility is that the dude is genuinely really ego-driven and irrational, and that the failed ambitions of his wannabe empire might get to him, and he might attempt to authorize some, a couple of international ballistic gamer moments and make a mess of the world. Now, if he were to do this, as I understand it, the protocol for Russian nuclear armament requires going through a couple of channels. And my personal opinion is that the top officials in Russia probably wouldn't let that happen. At least a lot of them wouldn't want to. I'm sure Putin is surrounded by a lot of yes men, but many of those yes men are oligarchs, people who are very wealthy because the, wealth and resources of the Soviet Union were carved up and privatized by powerful people. And I gotta say, given the economic hardship that they're facing right now, I imagine many of these oligarchs are probably feeling a little bit resentful that the wealth they've spent their entire lives sitting on is being destroyed by the ambitions of their leader. I don't know if there's going to be some internal effort at killing off Putin. That sounds like the plot of a, James Bond spy movie thing. Like, oh, they're mad, so they're going to kill their leader. But that stuff happens. That's not unheard of, especially in dictatorships. Used to be one of the most common ways people would achieve massive power was just by killing the last guy who had that power. It's been known to happen. Maybe there will be some scramble internally. Maybe there's a shadow cabinet forming within Putin's government. Very powerful oligarchs who are conspiring with each other to say, if he really loses it, I would rather be an oligarch in a country that's economically ruined but still exists than a dead person in a dead country because nuclear war happened and we're all dead. Can't say I disagree with their reasoning. My hope is that ultimately, whatever processes Putin would need to go through to end the world, if that is something that he's irrational enough to try for, would be stopped by other people. Because you can never just do it as one person, The process of launching a nuclear weapon requires dozens, hundreds of people to be involved, Not just the officials who have to give the orders, of course, but the engineers who have to prepare everything. There are plenty of stages for people to protest, and that's happened before during the Cold War multiple times. There were times when people were given the order to fire off the nukes, and the person there said no. There's the famous incident with the malfunctioning radar tracker that said there was a missile headed their way from Russia. There was the time during the Cuban Missile Crisis where the commander of the submarine wanted to launch the nuke, but there was a higher commander on board who got to say no. I think I'm remembering those right. It is terrifying that, the fate of the world can be held, at such a close grip. But this is one of the reasons why we have to fix the Russian problem, like, now, I worry about Russia in a way I don't worry about China. Don't get me wrong, China is a geopolitical enemy to the West, and they are, as I've said before, I think they're further from socialism than America is, okay? In spite of the fact that they've got red everything everywhere, I don't think socialism is the color red, nor do I think it's having a party that's called the Communist Party. It's, But, China, at least from what I've seen, they don't engage in this kind of madman brinksmanship. Their efforts at engaging in imperialist expansionism are economic, which for the most part the West's are as well. Russia doesn't have that same power, not the way China or America or the European Union does, because they're broke. Which means when they do imperialism, they have to use military force, which is obviously what they've been doing in Ukraine. Ukraine has been sung over to the West, mostly because we're more economically prosperous. It would be better for their people to be united with us. Russia had to stage an 8-year-long proxy war in the Donbass region by funding Russian separatists and giving them weapons. Military threats are what they have. And when military threats are how you maintain a crumbling empire, nuclear brinksmanship seems a hell of a lot closer to the table than it would for us doing our thing. This isn't the defense of Western imperialism, only an attack on ending the world in nuclear hellfire. If you are to be anxious over this, I can't stop you from doing so, but please keep in mind that I believe, however naively, I believe that it's not going to happen. So let's hope that it doesn't. Let's hope that no nuclear war happens. Let's hope that Kyiv stands. Let's hope that the sanctions against Russia not only embitter the citizens of that country against Putin, but also the oligarchs within it, because that's where the real power lies. And you know what? Let's hope that if everything works out, if Russia loses, their soldiers pull back, Putin kills himself, we can only dream. all that settles out, I think the West should rebuild Russia. And I don't mean we send in companies to invest or whatever. I mean we just give them a fuck ton of money. Because the sanctions we're levying right now are against the behavior of Russia's government, not the behavior of their people. That is not a democracy. Their people are not responsible for what their leader is doing, not even close. If the problems we're meaning to push against are solved, our next step should be making sure the people of Russia do not suffer needlessly as a consequence of the person who ruled over them. They should not be made to do that. And I would be proud to see my tax dollars, and be proud to see the tax dollars of people in other aligned countries, being spent providing aid to Russia so that their citizenry does not need to needlessly suffer. Ukraine too, of course, but that goes without saying. Of course we're going to provide aid to Ukraine. That is going to happen, guaranteed, if Ukraine repels Russia. But citizens, innocent civilians shouldn't suffer anymore. One hopes.